Happy Poem in Your Pocket Day! Robert Street Elementary School library students, my reading raters. Today is the last day of April. April's National Poetry Month, and I have a special book for you. It's called Poem in Your Pocket. I know a lot of you have been learning a lot about different kinds of poems, and this is about a class just like ours.
Mrs. Crane is coming to visit you for Poem in Your Pocket Day, said Mr. Tiffin. We're going to write poems of our own and put them in our pockets.
I'm going to wear my jeans with 6 pockets that day, Eleanor whispered to Molly. I'm going to have a different poem in each one. I'm sure your poems will be perfect, Molly whispered back. Eleanor thought about it, and it would be too show-offy to agree, so she didn't say a word, but inside, she nodded. Eleanor got to work. All during March, she studied poetry, and all during April, the class caught up with Eleanor. They read poetry books and learned poems by heart and wrote poems in their poetry journal. Every day, there was something new to learn. Mr. Tiffin taught them about similes, and they tried them out.
Robert is as tall as that really high building in the middle of town, said Robert.
Math is like a knot, said Tara.
Ones we can untangle together, said Mr. Miffin.
The class read short poems. These are called haiku, said Eleanor. Little poems can say a lot, said Charlie. They read puzzle poems.
These are called acrostics. They're fun to figure out together.
They read poems that looked like pictures. These are called concrete poems, said Eleanor. A concrete pumpkin seed, said Kimmy. And they read a whole lot of funny poems.
Hey, who knows poems can make you laugh, said Jake.
I don't know the name for these, said Eleanor.
Whew, said Molly.
Eleanor really likes poetry. One bright morning, Mr. Tiffin took the class outside. What do you see? He asked. Use your poet's eye. Everyone looked around. Buds. Buds are like tiny red firecrackers, said Charlie, waiting to explode into flowers. Sadness is a cracked sidewalk, said Tara.
Very good, said Mr. Tiffin. Miss Crane will be so impressed.
He noticed that Eleanor was being very quiet.
How about you, Eleanor?
What do you see with your poet's eyes? Eleanor wanted Miss Crane to be impressed with her, too. I'm still thinking, she said. There's a picture of Eleanor. She doesn't look very happy, does she? I think she looks worried. Let's see what she's worried about. One Friday afternoon, Mr. Tiffin brought everyone into the class a small brown bag with a surprise inside.
Sneak a peek inside your bags and then write a poem about what's in there, but don't tell anyone you're writing about.
We'll do our best to guess. The class took out their poetry journals and got to work. Then they read their poems out loud. Alex guessed that Jake had a pebble in his bag. She was right. Kimmy guessed that Molly had a glass animal, and she was right. She could even tell that it was a horse. No one could guess what Eleanor had in her brown bag. Her journal page was clean and blank. This shell, it's too perfect to write about, she said.
Try again at home tonight, said Mr. Tiffin. And remember, poetry is a messy business.
I wonder what he meant by that. Let's see. On Saturday night, Eleanor tried to finish her brown bag poem. She wrote 7 drafts. She only liked one. When she woke up in the morning, she read the poem she liked. This stinks, she said. On Sunday night, Eleanor wrote 6 haiku with a total of 3 metaphors and 2 similes, and she smiled as she went to bed. In the morning, she looked them over. These are not poetry. By Monday night, Eleanor was worried. She wrote 11 rhyming poems, and the next morning she threw them all off of her desk. Today is Poem in Your Pocket Day, and I don't have anything that's good enough. She really looks unhappy. Eleanor's eyes stung as she got ready for school. She wore a dress with only one tiny pocket with nothing inside it. The day was as gray as Eleanor's mood. The whole school was decorated for Poem in Your Pocket Day. There were pockets on the doors and poems in those pockets. There were pockets on the lockers and poems stuffed in those. There were rolled up poems and stapled poems. There were poems written in chalk on the sidewalk, but that one was ruined in the rain. All the students had poems in their pockets. All but one. Eleanor worked on her poem at recess. She worked on her poem in the girls' restroom. She even worked on her poem during science. But the more she worked, the harder it was to think. And at the end of the day, the students gathered in the gym for the poetry assembly. Mr. Tiffin told the school that Emma Crane was a great American poet. He led her to the stage, and she sat down in the school's special author chair. She looks like a queen, said Molly. She looks just perfect, said Alex. Emma Crane read some of her poems. She read them aloud. She told the students what it was like to be a writer, and she answered their questions. "Do you make a lot of money?" asked Robert. "Just enough," said Emma Crane. "Where do you get your ideas?" asked Charlie. "From everything I think and everything I feel," said Emma Crane. At last, it was time for Mr. Tiffin's class to read their poems. Eleanor could hardly breathe as her classmates went up to the stage and pulled their poems out of their pockets. Charlie recited his poem, and Emma Crane grinned. Robert shouted his poem. Emma Crane winked. Tara whispered her poem, and Emma Crane nodded. Finally, it was Eleanor's turn. She looked at Mr. Tiffin. "Would you rather not read your poem?" he asked. Eleanor could not even speak. I wanted my poem to be perfect, but I have nothing in my pocket, nothing at all." "You don't have to go up there," said Mr. Tiffin. "I can't disappoint Emma Crane," said Eleanor. And Eleanor slowly walked up onto the stage. It's hard when you want something to be perfect. She looked out at all the students and all the teachers, and then at Emma Crane herself. "My name is Eleanor," she said in a tiny voice, "and I don't have a poem in my pocket. I tried and I tried, but I couldn't get it right." Eleanor's being very brave. Let's see what happens. "Come over here, Eleanor." Emma Crane smiled a small smile as Eleanor walked closer. "No poem is ever perfect," she said in a voice only Eleanor could hear. "I thought of so many things," Eleanor told Emma Crane, "but they're all in my head." "Tell me what you've been thinking about, Eleanor," said Emma Crane. "I have a poem," she said, "in the pocket of my mind." She remembered the poetry books she had studied in the library. It is neat and perfect there. She used her poet's eye, as delicate as the shell and as sturdy. She thought about the treasure in her brown bag. It has mysteries hidden inside. Then she thought about her blank journal page. But when I try to write it down, the words disappear. She pictured her poem on the sidewalk that morning, like chalk on the sidewalk in the rain. And then Eleanor opened her eyes. At last Emma Crane spoke. "That's a poem in itself," she said to Eleanor. "Those words are from the heart, and words from the heart are where poetry begins." Eleanor stepped down from the stage. The assembly was over. Everybody clapped and cheered for Emma Crane. Eleanor was feeling too much to cheer, so she cheered inside, as loud as she could. Happy Poetry Month. Keep a poem in your pocket. And remember, the best poems always start from what's inside. I miss you. I'm looking forward to seeing us all together again.